Has debate jargon become too much of a chore? Does every round you enter leave you wanting to know more? Well, look no further because one clap is the key. It's time for Professor Graham and Kevin's ABCs. Hello, debaters. Welcome back to another episode of Professor Graham's ABCs of Debate. I'm Professor Graham here with my pal Kevin, and today the word of the day is going to be topicality. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Topicality is awesome. Is your opponent overstepping their bounds beyond where you think the resolution permits? Then look no further than T. T is a great way to keep your evil opponents in check when they inevitably do something that is just obscenely difficult for you to predict or prepare against in that round. Yeah, Kevin, that's a great way to think about T. It's a debate about the rules of debate. Because of this, a lot of the impacts and internal links tend to be very similar, although the specifics of how each AF is untopical tends to be far more specific. Topicality is built in a very similar way to any other offensive position in debate. Compare it to a DA, for example. You have a definition, a violation/link, internal links, and impacts. The only thing that's different is that instead of having a description of uniqueness, you have a definition. Every other part is the same. Again, fair. Let's look at each part individually. Remember, topicality is the argument that your opponents have gone too far outside where the resolution permits them to go. So let's take a simple policy resolution from a couple of years ago to use as an example. Resolved. The United States federal government should substantially reduce its restrictions on legal immigration to the United States. In this example, the affirmative has quite a few restrictions on what they can talk about. They must use the USFG, or United States federal government. It must be substantial. They must reduce restrictions. They may only affect legal immigration, and it must be immigration to the United States. All of those on their own are T debates waiting to happen, because if a team violates even one part of the resolution, they're in danger. Let's start by crafting a T shell by walking through this example. First, let's identify what definition we want to contest the affirmative on. The AF we'll be looking at makes a new refugee category, allowing immigrants to come to the country legally. The word we'll want to contest them on is restrictions, because the affirmative doesn't reduce existing laws to be topical, they create a brand new category. Thus, the definition that we'll read to define restrictions should reference existing law in some way to bolster our argument. That covers both our definition and our violation/link because we've described what word they've misinterpreted and why they don't fall within the bounds of the resolution. Now we're going to explain to the judge why that matters. Remember, T is a debate about debate, so we have to shift how we think about impacts and internal links entirely. I think it's easiest to just start with the impacts. Really, there's only two: fairness and education. Fairness as an impact is just that the game has rules. We need to follow them. Otherwise, we give people unfair advantages, making the activity pointless if people are predisposed to win. Education as an impact is that this is an activity about learning more about both our actual arguments we make in round and about the advocacy skills that we gain. If you view both of these as the end goal of debate, to play a fair and fun game that has the purpose of making us more knowledgeable about the world, then violating the resolution hurts our ability to play this game optimally. Usually, education is the better impact, because fairness is sometimes seen as a way to ensure we get education from debate, making it just another step on the internal link chain. But I can definitely see it as a standalone impact if done well. Yep, now it's time to backtrack a little on our example. Why does the AF not following one word in the resolution make the game less educational or unfair? There's a few buzzwords that I'm going to delve into now to explain. Ground loss is the argument that the negative's general toolkit is less effective because the AF does weird things. Our example from before is immune to disadvantages that deal with expanding existing immigration categories because they don't do that. Limits is the argument that the affirmative expands the limits of what they're allowed to have access to a little too far, so they get advantage ground and tools to fight counter plans that they wouldn't have otherwise had if they were topical. Predictability is the argument that the affirmative has to be easy to predict, so the negative could conceivably prepare a debate against them. If you create a category for anything that you want, there's no telling how many possible combinations or permutations of different things the AF could potentially do. The list goes on, but these are probably the most popular internal links into education and fairness. Thus, our story here is complete. The affirmative is untopical because they don't fall under the word restrictions. They create a new category of immigrants, which is impossible to predict and makes our disadvantages about expanding existing immigration structures obsolete. That's a reason to vote negative on fairness because debate is a game we all want a fair chance at winning, and they've skewed it in their favor. Debating topicality on the affirmative is the same as everywhere else. Refute your opponent's silly arguments. If you're creating a new immigration category, then surely that's reducing restrictions on immigrants because there's fewer barriers to entry into the country. Maybe you think their distinction is trivial, and at least you're reasonably connected to the resolution, so the negative should just prep better. Them not having a case negative because they don't know how to prepare is not a reason that you should lose. The most important arguments to include in your responses to topicality should be a counter definition, a we meet argument to prove that you do meet their definition, answer their warrants as to why your AF is bad, and explain why, even if they're right about all of their claims, your model of debate is good. With just these few arguments, you'll be able to set against most topicality arguments. But the best way to avoid T, or to not be afraid of it, is to just be topical. Don't let your opponents have the chance of reading T substantial, just make a ginormous AF. Topicality is quite a bit to have to talk about. You doing alright, Kevin? Cover? I hardly know her. Hey, thanks again for watching today's episode of Professor Graham's ABCs of Debate. As always, I'm Professor Graham, and that's my pal Kevin. Yeah, if you ever need any help with debate stuff at all, my email should be right up here. Just make sure you CC your coach. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. With any debate tips that you might need, I'll drop that knowledge on you. Bam. Thanks for watching. It's been a pleasure. See y'all later.